After publicly announcing on this show that he was gay, New York Army National Guard Lieutenant Dan Choi was told last week that he will be discharged from the service. Mr. Choi is a West Point graduate, an Arab linguist. He's an Iraq War veteran. Nobody asked, he told, and now he's out, both out of the closet and soon to be out of the military. When Second Lieutenant Sandy Zhao faced discharge from the Army for being gay, she wrote President Obama, and he hand-wrote her back personally to say, among other things, that he is, quote, committed to changing our policy, our current policy, excuse me. Is there anyone who likes Don't Ask, Don't Tell at this point? A policy which has cost the military nearly 13,000 service members since 1993 at a cost of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars? Why, yes, there is one at least. Senator John McCain.
The policy has been working, and I think it's been working well.
The follow-up that is begging to be asked is, of course, working well for whom, Senator? Joining us now is Clifford Alexander. He was Secretary of the Army under President Carter and Chairman of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission under President Johnson. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Do you perceive any perspective from which Don't Ask, Don't Tell could be described as a policy that's working well?
Absolutely none. I can see several reasons why it doesn't work. First of all, when John McCain says this, how would he know? The hypocrisy of this is that you ask people to act as if they are not what they are. I said at one point that it's a little bit like asking a Jewish person to pretend to be a Muslim during his or her service or during life generally. When we have people who are asked to risk their lives, asked to provide certain services for this country, and we tell them that because of their sexual preference, don't tell us if it's a certain sexual preference, that runs against any democratic principle that we can think of. And the no-necks who keep pushing this policy really do need to have it changed. Not studied, not long hearings, but changed. And I do think that it needs legislation. It needs people in the House and in the Senate to come forward and say, this is time to make America be what America says it is.
In terms of the strategy for moving forward and for changing this, you say that legislation would be the way forward. It is possible that the president could, by executive action, just stop implementation of the current policy. Just say, you know, we're going to review it, we're going to try to come up with something new. In the meantime, stop kicking people out. Would that be an appropriate executive action?
If that is an executive action that is possible, indeed it would be appropriate. I've known this president for 15 years. Our son was his policy advisor for 20 months. He's a law professor. Our daughter was his inaugural poet. I love him. I love his family. And he knows and should know that the principles that say don't ask, don't tell are not in conformity to what he believes in or why he was elected. I do think that he will remember and should remember that you get a certain time on this earth, and particularly as president, to do those things that are in the best interest of this country, in the best interest of what we believe in, and if it is possible to do that, stop listening to the people who say, oh, you can wait 10 months because if you wait a few months, then you can get such and such passed. I do think it is something that presently is embarrassing thousands upon thousands of individuals serving in uniform. It's also saying to other people who are not in uniform and do not want to be hypocritical and say that there's something that they're not, that they don't even consider the military as a possible service to their country. This is a profound mistake that we made, and it's a profound mistake that ought to be changed as quickly as possible, with a lot of who struck John left on the sideline and a lot of no-necks not saying that, oh gosh, we're going to be embarrassed because we're going to be doing this or that, or we're going to have to investigate this or that in the service. We ought to spend much more time worrying about the injustices that take place in the service today, and not so much about making people hide what they are. That's just plain, if you want to put it in the corny terms, the good corny terms, it's un-American.
Mr. Secretary, West Point grads who are fighting against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, including this group that First Lieutenant Dan Choi helped found, a group called Nights Out, they're asking people to flood the White House switchboard with calls tomorrow to say, get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, move on this now, making some of the same arguments that you're making here tonight. Strategically, politically, do you think that's an effective way forward, a grassroots campaign like that? Is the White House the place where pressure should be paid at this point, or should pressure be paid right now at the Pentagon to try to stop some of the resistance to any change?
I do think that pressure is the American way. So whenever it is done, I do think it is very important that people who are not gay get into this fight, and it is a fight, for an equality of opportunity for people without hypocrisy. So I think many of us who have not said as much as we should have should start speaking up, should start demanding of this country the kind of equity that we should be continually demanding. I do think there are techniques, and I won't pretend to be a politician here, that get the attention of people. But I do think it is at every level. It's in the legislative branch, it is in the military branch, but let's remember this. The military is not political, or shouldn't be political. The military serves at the pleasure of the commander-in-chief. It is not the job. The 4 years I was Secretary of the Army, I never once asked the politics of any given person in uniform, man or woman, nor should I have. So they can have their opinions, but their opinions aren't, in this instance, what we should be thinking about. We ought to be thinking about the people who are the victims of a very misplaced policy. That is what we are talking about. And it shouldn't be people who are just gay and lesbian who are doing this. It is all of us who ought to be thinking about it and doing it. And just because somebody says, as I read in the paper the other day, some advisor to the president, that we don't want to poke a finger into somebody's eye and move this too fast. Well, too fast is yesterday. And too fast today is not too fast. It is the kind of approach that we have to take that must engage us in seeing to it that people who are willing to risk their lives at least have the dignity of being themselves.
Clifford Alexander, former Secretary of the Army, it's an honor to have you on the show tonight, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Be with you.
Coming up.